Today's topic is mind that heals, mind that hurts. I will be talking about this from the Buddhist perspective. The fundamental teaching of the Buddha is the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth is the truth of suffering. The second noble truth is the truth of the cause of suffering, which is craving. The third noble truth is the truth of the cessation of suffering, and finally the fourth noble truth is the truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering, which is the Noble Eightfold Path. Since sickness, both physical and mental, is suffering, can we then say that the cause of our sickness is also craving? At first glance, it seems too simplistic to say so. Yet, when we reflect deeply, we find that it is actually quite true, both for the suffering of the body, as well as the suffering of the mind. We crave for a lot of things in life. For example, let's take a look at food. A lot of people like to eat too much, and because they crave for too much food, they grow fat. Obesity is now a major illness in the affluent world. Some people like to take sweet things, so they make their diabetes worse. They make their diabetes uncontrollable, and that leads to all kinds of illnesses, and complications as well, including damages to the kidneys, which is one of the worst complications ever for a diabetic patient. In fact, we all know that if you have diabetes, and you don't control it, within 20 years your kidneys will fail and you will be going on dialysis. If we already know this, then we should know from the beginning that we need to control what we eat. Some people like salty food. Salty food gives rise to high blood pressure. If we take too much salty food over a long period of time, then we will get high blood pressure. Again, the complications of high blood pressure are many. You can get stroke, you can get heart attack or heart failure. You can also get kidney problems. One of the complications of high blood pressure is kidney failure as well, just like diabetes. It is likely that you will get it not immediately, but maybe 20 years later, if it is not controlled. If it is controlled, then you don't have the problem. That's why we treat to control it. So, this craving for food is a cause for our physical illnesses, such as hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, kidney failure. All these illnesses, if you look and trace back, is due to our craving for food. Not entirely, of course, because there is also a genetic component to it. Sometimes, if your parents have it, you are likely to get it. But by and large, we can control our craving, and so we can control the levels of diabetes, for example. So craving, if you look at it from this perspective, is the cause of our physical illnesses. But, there are also cravings in other ways. We do not crave just for food. We also crave for a certain lifestyle. In our mind, to be successful in life, we must get to a certain level of achievement. For example, we think that in order to be successful, we need to have a big house, maybe a bungalow or semi-D, we need to drive a big car, BMW, Mercedes, or whatever new continental car. Perhaps we need to wear branded clothes, together with some branded accessories, and some branded makeup. These are our vision of what a successful person is. Of course, it need not necessarily be true, but we crave for it anyway, because that has been imprinted in our mind. That is what a picture of success is. So, in a way, we crave success, and when we crave for this kind of success, we work ourselves to the ground to achieve it. We have no time to look after our physical health. We have no time to look after our emotional and mental health. I see more and more patients who are overstressed from work. They end up with anxiety, depression, and a lot of worries. These are mental and emotional illnesses as a result of our cravings for certain things. Then, in the third noble truth, the Buddha said that there is a state where there is a cure for suffering, and that state is nibbana. This is a state that is free from suffering. We are now living in a world where suffering is definite, but there is a state where you will not be bothered by suffering. It is a state, not a place. The Buddha also said that there is a way to reach that state, and he called that way the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, in the Noble Eightfold Path, the Buddha started with right views and right thoughts. Then, he also talked about right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. He further divided these into three aspects: the wisdom aspect, Panna, which comprises the first two, right views and right thoughts. Then, the morality or Sila aspect, which is right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Finally, concentration or Samadhi aspect, which is right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. As Buddhists, we are quite good, I think, with right speech, right action, and right livelihood. We are quite aware of the fact that when we talk, we need to be very careful of what we say. We also know that what we do affect not only ourselves but other people. So we try to be very careful with what we do. Naturally, we also try to choose a kind of livelihood that is in accordance with the Buddhist teachings. But I think that is where most of us end our mindfulness. We don't take very good care of our thoughts. The Buddha said that mind is the forerunner of all states. In other words, it is from the mind that everything else starts. So, if we want to take care of our speech, or we want to take care of our deeds or our actions, then perhaps the best thing to do is to take care of our thoughts, because our thoughts will lead our speech and our actions. So, if we begin from the root, then everything will fall into place. Unfortunately, the area of thoughts is something most people don't bother too much about. Yet, that is the most important thing. In fact, the Buddha's teaching is all about development of the mind, about mental cultivation. The reason why he spent so much time on mental cultivation is because that is the key. That is the key to end your suffering, the key to end your illnesses. Of all the illnesses in the world, the majority of these illnesses arise from the mind. In fact, you can almost trace every one of it to the mind. The scientific world and the medical world are just beginning to understand this, and are just beginning to realize the truth of this statement. We are beginning to understand that in our mind, once a certain thought arises, whether it is positive or negative, it will create a chain reaction. A chain reaction in the sense that when we have a thought, that thought triggers off some neural transmitters in the brain cells, and that triggers off some electrical charges. That neural transmitters and electrical charges go on as the first line of communication in the body. From there, they go on to trigger off hormones in the body that moves into the bloodstream. These hormones are chemicals that go to each and every single cell in our body. And there, at the end where the cells are, the final message is received. So, if your mind begins with a good thought, the final message to your cell is a good message, a positive message, and the response in the cellular area is positive. In other words, what happens is that it ends up with the cells becoming healthier, the immune system becoming stronger, and no sickness appears in the cell. On the other hand, if you started with a negative thought, the same whole chain reaction occurs, neural transmitters, hormones, and then it goes all the way to the cells in every organ in our body. There, negative changes occur. That's how we get illnesses. When our thoughts are predominantly negative, then illnesses occur. The illnesses that occur in certain organs are actually symptoms of the negative thoughts that you have predominantly in your mind. I will give an example. I have a patient. She was in her mid-30s. She came to see me one day because she was having asthma, wheezing and difficulty in breathing. When I listened to her lungs with a stethoscope, I could hear all the signs that definitely tell us this is asthma. Of course, being a doctor treating physical illnesses, I gave her all the medications for asthma, inhalers, tablets, etc. Then I said, okay, you take this medicine, you go back, and in a week's time, you come back and we'll review your progress. Later, when she came back to see me, she was still asthmatic, with no improvement. Okay, never mind. I will change your medicine, something stronger. So she went back again, and a week later, she came back, still no change in her condition. But this time, she came back in the afternoon. You see, my practice is such that in the morning, I am very busy. In the afternoon, I am quite free. So when she came in the afternoon, we managed to have some time to chit-chat. I asked her, was there anything that happened before your asthmatic attack? Aha, now we got the answer. She said, yes, 2 weeks before my asthmatic attack, I had a miscarriage. Oh, a miscarriage, huh? What happened? Well, I was in my early pregnancy, about 6 weeks or so. And then one day, I had cramps in the stomach, and the miscarriage happened in the night. We went to the hospital, and I was admitted. Then they did an ultrasound, and they saw the fetus was out already. So I had a DANT done. I said, "Oh yeah, how did you feel?" That was all I said, "How did you feel?" She started crying. She started crying because she felt so guilty. She thought it was her fault that she had a miscarriage. I think every mother is like that. Something happens to their children and the first person they blame is themselves. So miscarriage must be her fault. So she had this strong sense of guilt. But something else made the situation worse. She said, "I couldn't talk about this with my husband, because my husband refused to listen. My husband refused to talk about the event." It was obvious that the husband was not ready to face the fact. But she needed somebody to talk to about her feelings. And the person she was supposed to be able to talk to wouldn't listen to her. So she had a lot of guilt, a lot of pain, inside her, and she couldn't do anything about it until that afternoon when somebody innocently asked her a simple question, and everything spilled out. She cried, and I used a lot of tissue paper from the Kleenex box that afternoon. But it made her feel good that she was finally able to talk about the pain and the guilt. I assured her that it was not her fault that she had a miscarriage. It could be that the fetus was not ready to be born. In fact, many a time, fetuses abort on their own because they are not ready. They abort very early, and the mother may not even know that she was pregnant. She thought that her period just came. When you thought the period just came, you have no feeling of guilt, because you didn't even know you were pregnant. A lot of it happens like that. So I told her, if you had not known it, and it had been aborted silently like that, would you have felt guilty? And she said, "No, because I wouldn't know." Actually, that's the problem. Now you blame yourself because you know it. But it is not true. Some fetuses abort because they are just not ready for it. It is the natural way of excreting themselves rather than being born with a lot of deformities. They are not healthy fetuses. They will abort by themselves. But the real surprise was, 1 month later she came back to see me. And then she said, "Dr. Ong, I'm cured. I've got no more asthma." So I said, "You took the medicine, ah?" "No, I didn't touch the medicine. I was cured after I talked to you that day." Amazing, isn't it? It shows how powerful our mind is in influencing our body. This example clearly taught me how powerful our mind is. So powerful that it can turn our physical body into illnesses. That day, I was convinced of the Buddhist teachings, of how powerful the mind is, and that the mind is truly the forerunner of all states. Because now I see it with my own eyes. Before that, it was just all talk, that the mind is the forerunner of all states. But now, I truly believe it. Mind is the forerunner of all states. The Buddha also gave us a few clues on how we can use this mind in a proper way. He said that if you think good, good things result. If you think bad, bad things result. Basically, he is talking about the law of cause and effect, the law of karma. He is showing us how our mind works. Unfortunately, we only listened and said we understood, but we don't do anything about our thoughts. This is because, like I said, we are good Buddhists when it comes to speech and actions, because these are things that other people can see. When we say bad things, other people can know. When we do something bad, other people can see. But when we think negative things, nobody knows. This is where we lack effort. We lack effort in training our mind, which in fact, is the most important thing. We have to start with the mind, because when we start with the mind, then our emotions get better, our physical body gets better. With all the research that is going on now, we now know how the mind affects the emotions, and how the emotions affect the body. This is true. This is already something scientific, and accepted in mainstream science. Now, why is it that, despite the fact that we know our mind is so important, we still behave the same way, and still do things that are negative? To get to that answer, we need to look at cravings again. We need to go back and analyze cravings, and know what craving is. Craving is a desire. It is a desire to chase after what we perceive as real, or as the truth, or as good. The key word is perceive. It may not be good, but we perceive that way. So, it is a belief that we are chasing after. We crave for a belief. The reason why we crave for it is because that belief has long ago been imprinted in our mind, whether it was from our past experience in this lifetime or from many, many lifetimes ago. That belief has been imprinted in our mind, and it has been imprinted in a subconscious way, outside of our conscious awareness. That is why it is so difficult to recognize it, or to identify it. If we were conscious of it, we could have easily removed it. Unfortunately, we are not conscious of it. A good example of this is the little baby elephant that is tied to a stake. I think perhaps you have heard of this story, but I shall share with you anyway. In Thailand, they have a lot of elephants. They use elephants there for a lot of work. When an elephant is still a small little baby elephant, they tie the elephant with a big rope on one of the elephant's legs, and the other end of the rope to a big stake. Then, they hammer the stake into the ground tightly. Since the baby elephant is still small, she cannot pull the stake up. Even though she tries at first, it couldn't move. She feels that she is tied there already. Several times, she tried, and finally she gave up. Then the elephant grows up to become an adult elephant. Still, the trainer just ties the leg to the stake in the ground, and the elephant doesn't even try to pull the stake out, believing that if she does it, she will not be able to pull it out. It has been conditioned from young that she cannot escape. That is how our mind is conditioned. Another example of this is a famous example in the scientific community. It's called Pavlovs Experiment. This Russian scientist called Pavlov demonstrated the effects of conditioning the mind by training the dog to salivate. What he does is this. First, he rings a bell, then he gives the dog food. And the dog would happily wag its tail and salivate because of the food in front. Every time he does that, the dog will respond in that way. Eventually, after some conditioning, what he does is, he just rings the bell, but serves no food. The dog will still wag his tail and salivate. Although there is no food, the dog will salivate anyway because of the bell. Of course, this type of conditioning is gradual conditioning. You have to reinforce it many times, then it gets conditioned, or in other words, it gets imprinted into the subconscious mind. But we can also be conditioned by just a single event or a single act, a very emotional one. That event could be imprinted into our mind and it becomes something that drives us. For this, I will share with you my personal experience. Some of you may remember May 13, 1969, the racial riots in Malaysia. At that time, I was a little boy. On that day, the government extended a curfew because of the racial riot. Where I stayed, there were some soldiers patrolling in their patrol cars and in their jeeps. Now, being a young boy, I was curious because I had never seen a soldier before. So when I heard a car, I quickly ran out into the middle of the road to take a look at the soldiers. Being an innocent child, I didn't know the danger. The car that came by was a jeep with a soldier driving it, and behind the jeep, it was an open jeep, there was a submachine gun with another soldier holding it. When I ran out, my mother panicked, so she screamed. The soldier who was holding the submachine gun was looking elsewhere. When he heard the scream, he turned with the submachine gun pointing right at me. When I saw the machine gun, I froze. Somehow, I know that was dangerous. My mother quickly ran out of the house, grabbed me, and pulled me back in, but that shock of seeing the soldier with the submachine gun pointing the gun at me was enough to imprint the fear of uniformed men. From then onwards, whenever I see a policeman, I start to shiver, for no reason. Not that I have done something wrong, but I would just shiver, so much so that when I'm walking in town, and I see a policeman there, and that's where I want to go, I would go the other way, just to avoid the uniformed man. That fear was already imprinted. Fortunately, as I grew up, I was aware that this was an irrational fear. There was no reason why I should be fearful. It was irrational. So I worked on it, and eventually, I was able to overcome it. Nowadays, when I see a policeman, there's no more fear. But I had to work hard to overcome that. I had to actually face my fear, by purposefully walking past a policeman whenever I see one. Actually, each time I walked past a policeman, I feel very fearful. But the more I do that, the more I realize there is nothing to fear, and soon I relearnt something, nothing to fear. Eventually, I walked past a policeman without any more fear. I had replaced that fear with the new belief that there is nothing to fear about policemen. So, this is what happens to us. This is why we crave for things. It is conditioned into us because of our past behavior, because of our past experience, either in this life, or in our previous lives. The way we crave for food, or for certain lifestyle, is because it has all been conditioned into our mind. Who said that you need a big house, a big car, and all the nice things in order to be able to live a decent life? The Buddha didn't say so, but who said so? The TV, the media, the newspaper. All the people who try to sell you something. They are the ones who tell you how to behave, and they are the one who have imprinted that into your mind. So you are convinced that in order for you to be successful, or seen as successful, this is what you should have. But we don't have to. In fact, the Buddha's message is for us to unclutter the mind. We need very little to be happy. I know of one person who, if he gets his father's inheritance, he will be one of the richest men. Yet, he choose not to. He choose to renounce, and become a Buddhist monk, because he knows his priority, and because he truly understands the Buddha's teachings well. Therefore, sometimes we have to uncondition ourselves. In fact, if you want to be free from a lot of sicknesses, this is what you need to do. You have to uncondition your mind. Now, I can also tell you a story of a nun who had cancer, and she was able to cure herself of that cancer. When she was told she had cancer by her doctor, she was depressed. But after some time, she thought, now that I have only a short time to live, I will devote all my time to meditation, improving myself. If I meditate, if I purify my mind, perhaps I can cure my cancer. Even if I don't cure my cancer, the act of meditation would have purified my mind so much that I would not be too affected by the illness, and at least I could be reborn, perhaps, into a more fortunate state next time. So she spent her time meditating. Day and night, she meditated. She made it a habit, even in her daily work, to be doing things mindfully. She has made meditation a regular part of her life. About half a year or 1 year, I can't remember exactly, she went back to see the doctor, and to her surprise, the doctor said that the cancer was no more there. What did you do? She didn't do anything, she said. I just meditated. I just keep my mind pure. I don't think even about the illness. I don't even think about the cancer that I have. I just make sure that every time that I think, or I am aware of a thought, that thought is a pure thought. It is a good thought. And that is all I did. And to her surprise, the cancer was gone. Of course the doctor said, oh, a miracle has happened. And it is true. A miracle has happened because the mind has changed. And when she looked back, she realized that before she had the cancer, she was like everybody else, worrying about this, worrying about that. The moment she decided to give up all of that, and just focus on cultivating her mind, all her worries were gone. Her mind is no more focused on the negative. Her mind is constantly focusing on the positive. And, so with positive mind, positive emotions, ends up in positive body. The body heals itself. So, the mind heals the body, just like the lady with asthma. And that is what we call a miracle. So, this is an exceptional case of how a person can heal himself or herself, just by clearing all the mental and emotional defilements. It starts with the mind. Once you start with the mind, the emotion will clear itself and then the body will eventually clear itself. It may take a lot of time, but the good news is that even if you have started with your mind and have relieved a lot of negative energy but your body is still not healed, you would still have benefited. At least, the disease would not have been so unendurable, so unacceptable, so painful. It will become more bearable. The other benefit is, of course, if you do die of that disease eventually, at least you will have a purer mind. that means you will probably be able to die more gracefully, more dignified, without so much fear. That itself is worth it, even if nothing else works. There's a lot of fear of dying. I see that in a lot of patients. Let me proceed to teach you a method on how to transform your emotion. I learnt from a Western author by the name of Christopher Westra. He's not a Buddhist, but his method is very Buddhistic. He outlined 8 simple steps to emotional transformation. Step 1. Accept responsibility. The first step is that you must accept responsibility. You must always accept responsibility for your emotions. Why? Because your emotion is your own creation, not somebody else's. The trigger may have been from somebody else, but you always have a choice as to how you want to react. So it is your choice, whether you are consciously aware of it or not. It is your creation. So start by accepting responsibility for your emotions. Step 2. Name the emotion. The second step is to name your emotion. Why do you want to give a name to the emotion? The reason is very simple. The moment you are able to name the emotion accurately, you will have clarity and awareness, and you will be conscious of the emotion. You will find, if you have never tried this before, that most of us have very limited vocabulary when it comes to describing emotions: happy, sad, angry. That's about all. In reality, there are a lot of very subtle emotional labels and description as well. So, the more you practice this, the more you are clearer about your emotion. Basically, it is a way to improve your EQ, emotional quotient. When you name your emotion, you become better at recognizing your emotion. Step 3. Let go of the story. The third step is letting go of the story. What does it mean by letting go of the story? The story is what happens outside that triggers the emotion. The story is something we always blame on. On the outside, it looks like there is a story, but in actual fact, from the first step, you know that we create our own emotion. We decide how to respond to it. Therefore, don't blame the story. Instead, let go that story. Let go of the trigger or the person who actually triggers off that emotion. Let go of the need to blame others for our suffering. Our suffering is a result of our automatic reaction to an external trigger. It is a mental habit, based on a false belief. In truth, regardless of who or what triggers our pain, we always have a choice regarding how we want to respond to it. We need to bring this truth to the forefront, and take responsibility for our own reaction, our own creation. Step 4. Bless your emotion. The fourth step is bless your emotion. Bless your emotion means be grateful for your emotion, and be thankful for your emotion. Why? Because your emotion is your best teacher. When you look at your emotion as a teacher, then you can see that it is a gift to you. There is a lesson in there for you. And when you bless it, then you open your mind to new possibilities. If you keep blaming others, and if you keep resisting accepting responsibility for your emotion, you will never look inward. You will never look to try to find out what is the belief that is causing the emotion. Step 5. Feel your emotion. Feel your emotion means you allow yourself to release the energy associated with the emotion. If there is a lot of anger, just feel it. Okay. I'm experiencing anger. There's a lot of mindfulness you need to have here. Most people can't do this. That's why meditation is very useful. It increases your mindfulness so that this kind of step becomes easier for you. If you don't have this level of mindfulness, going through this step can be very difficult. So, the first thing to do is to train your mind to be mindful. Once you are able to be mindful, then this step becomes very simple. Feel the emotion means you don't want to resist the emotion. If you resist, it persists and stays on longer. It becomes a block and remains there. If you allow yourself to experience it in a positive way, in a conscious way, then you won't cause too much damage. Once the energy is released, you let it go. You don't cling on to it anymore. Step 6. Ask for clarity. Ask for the lesson. Is there a lesson for me here? To me, the biggest lesson was the realization that I am solely responsible for the creation of my emotion, the realization that I have a choice as to how I respond to a trigger. Once I learned that, I learned to take full responsibility for my emotion, for my life. My resistance melts away. The negative energy that was there as a stumbling block to my healing and growth can be gently released. Step 7. Identify the belief. As I have mentioned earlier, behind every emotion there is a false belief. There is a self-limiting belief, a belief that is not working well for you. You want to change that. Step number 7 is to identify that belief. Step 8. Replace the unhealthy belief. The final step is to replace that unwholesome belief with a newer belief, a more effective belief, a more wholesome or skillful belief. That's what the Buddha used. The word that the Buddha used is skillful. You want to discard all the unskillful or ineffective beliefs, and replace them with more positive and more effective beliefs. Finally, when you do that, you would have replaced that imprint in your mind that has been playing your life all the while, like an old broken record. Now you have more awareness, you have better control. You can choose what you want to believe. When you choose the right thing to believe in and to focus on, then you get what you want. It is very important to focus on the right thing because what you focus on grows. I have a patient who says, "I have cancer." She had breast cancer. The breast cancer had been removed and she was following a very strict diet and exercised every day, and yet the cancer recurred. She said, "I have done all that is necessary to lead a healthy life. How come I still get my cancer?" I said, "What did you focus on? Did you focus on your illness? Did you focus on the fear of getting the recurrence? Or did you focus on just being healthy?" There is a big difference here, because whatever you focus on grows. If you are watching your diet, and doing your exercise with the focus, "I'm afraid I'll get the recurrence, I'm afraid I'll get the recurrence," then most probably you will get the recurrence because that is what you focused on. You are focusing on fear, and fear will grow and infest your mind, your emotion and your body. On the other hand, if your focus is on a peaceful mind, a fearless mind, then eventually this is what you will get, and your emotion and body will reflect that. In these two examples, outwardly the habit looks the same, but internally the mindset is different, and that makes all the difference to the outcome. Therefore, you must know how to focus. Never focus on the negative, because if you focus on the negative will come. Instead, you should train yourself to focus on the positive. Each time you catch yourself focusing on the negative, change that to something positive. Instead of saying, "I don't want to be sick," you should be saying, "I am healthy," and you should imagine yourself being in good health. So, I hope that now you have a clearer understanding of how the Buddha's teaching has actually shown us that if you want to lead a healthy life, and be free from sickness, then start with your mind. Purify your mind. Keep your mind in a positive state of health. And the most useful skill here is mindfulness, which gets sharper with your meditation practice. So, now you know what type of mind can heal you, and what type of mind can hurt you. And you know what you need to do to get a healthy mind and a healthy body. I wish you all the best in your pursuit of a healthy body and mind.